A Mary Sue is a generic name for any fictional character who is so competent or perfect that this appears unrealistic for the world's settings, even in the context of the fictional setting. Mary Sues are often an author's idealized or flawless self-insertion. They may excel at tasks that should not be possible for them, or they may upstage the protagonist of a fictional setting, such as by saving them. They may disregard previously established aspects of the fiction such as characterization and natural laws. Mary Sue is a type of stock character. The principal criticism of the Mary Sue character as a literary device is that it undermines the drama and conflict of the narrative by presenting the protagonist as omnipotent and universally accepted. Narrative structure requires a protagonist to have a character arc, a transformation from one state to another, weak to strong, fearful to brave, naive to sophisticated. They confront an obstacle they can't overcome, make an internal change, and overcome the obstacle, or in the case of tragedy fail to do so. A Mary Sue has no internal flaw to confront, has no arc, and therefore there can be no drama. Mary Sue characters were first identified in fan fiction in 1973, but they have subsequently been identified in professional fiction and in films. A male character with similar traits may be labeled a Gary Stu or Marty Stu. Critics, writers, and commentators have debated the way the term is used, both in general and in its application to specific fictional characters. The term Mary Sue comes from the name of a character created by Paula Smith in 1973 for her parody story A Trekkie's Tale, published in her fanzine Menagerie No. 2. The story starred Lieutenant Mary Sue, the youngest lieutenant in the fleet, only 15 and a half years old, and satirized unrealistic characters in Star Trek fan fiction. The complete story reads: "Gee, golly, gosh, glorioski, thought Mary Sue as she stepped on the bridge of the Enterprise. Here I am, the youngest lieutenant in the fleet, only 15 and a half years old. Captain Kirk came up to her. 'Oh, Lieutenant, I love you madly. Will you come to bed with me?' 'Captain, I am not that kind of girl.' 'You're right, and I respect you for it. Here, take over the ship for a minute while I go get some coffee for us.' Mr. Spock came onto the bridge. 'What are you doing in the command seat, Lieutenant?' 'The captain told me to.' Flawlessly logical. I admire your mind. Captain Kirk, Mr. Spock, Dr. McCoy, and Mr. Scott beamed down with Lieutenant Mary Sue to Rigel XXF's VII. They were attacked by green androids and thrown into prison. In a moment of weakness, Lieutenant Mary Sue revealed to Mr. Spock that she too was half Vulcan. Recovering quickly, she sprung the lock with her hairpin and they all got away back to the ship. But back on board, Dr. McCoy and Lieutenant Mary Sue found out that the men who had beamed down were seriously stricken by the jumping cold Robbies, Mary Sue less so. While the 4 officers languished in sick bay, Lieutenant Mary Sue ran the ship, and ran it so well she received the Nobel Peace Prize, the Vulcan Order of Gallantry, and the Tralfamadorian Order of Good Guyhood. However, the disease finally got to her and she fell fatally ill. In the sick bay as she breathed her last, she was surrounded by Captain Kirk, Mr. Spock, Dr. McCoy, and Mr. Scott, all weeping unashamedly at the loss of her beautiful youth and youthful beauty, intelligence, capability, and all-around niceness. Even to this date, her birthday is a national holiday on the Enterprise. In 1976, Menagerie's editors referred to the original story, writing, "Mary Sue Stories, the adventures of the youngest and smartest ever person to graduate from the academy and ever get a commission at such a tender age. Usually characterized by unprecedented skill in everything from art to zoology, including karate and arm wrestling. This character can also be found burrowing her way into the good graces/heart/mind of one of the big 3, Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, if not all 3 at once. She saves the day by her wit and ability, and, if we are lucky, has the good grace to die at the end, being grieved by the entire ship." While originally used to describe fan fiction characterization, the term has also been applied to professionally published fiction, one example being the main character of the Star Trek novel Dreadnought. 1986, by Diane Carey. The term Mary Sue has gained a connotation of wish fulfillment and is commonly associated with self-insertion, though the characterization of upstaging the established protagonist remains fundamental. True self-insertion is a literal and generally undisguised representation of the author. Most characters described as Mary Sues are not, though they are often called proxies for the author. The negative connotation comes from this wish fulfillment implication. The Mary Sue is judged as a poorly developed character, too perfect and lacking in realism to be interesting. In Chapter 4 of her book Enterprising Women, Camille Bacon-Smith states that fear of creating a Mary Sue may be restricting and even silencing to some writers. Smith quotes an issue of the Star Trek fanzine archives as identifying Mary Sue paranoia as one of the sources for the lack of believable, competent, and identifiable with sick female characters. In this article, author Joanna Cantor interviews her sister Edith, also an amateur editor, who says she receives stories with cover letters apologizing for the tale as a Mary Sue, even when the author admits she does not know what a Mary Sue is. According to Edith Cantor, while Paula Smith's original Trekkie's tale was only 10 paragraphs long, in terms of their impact on those whom they affect, those words Mary Sue have got to rank right up there with the Selective Service Act. At ClipperCon 1987, a Star Trek fan convention held yearly in Baltimore, Maryland, Smith interviewed a panel of female authors who say they do not include female characters in their stories at all. She quoted one as saying, "Every time I've tried to put a woman in any story I've ever written, everyone immediately says, 'This is a Mary Sue.'" Smith also pointed out that participants in a panel discussion in January 1990 noted with growing dismay that any female character created within the community is damned with the term Mary Sue. However, Bacon-Smith notes that fans have argued that in Star Trek as originally created, James T. Kirk is himself a Marty Stew, and that the label seems to be used more indiscriminately on female characters who do not behave in accordance with the dominant culture's images and expectations for females as opposed to males. Author Ann C. Crispin is quoted as saying, "The term Mary Sue constitutes a put-down, implying that the character so summarily dismissed is not a true character, no matter how well drawn, what sex, species, or degree of individuality." Marty Stew, Gary Soon, or Larry Stew are alternative names given to this trope, when the same wish fulfillment aspect is applied to male characters. In 2012, Paula Smith told Cynthia Walker that the male alternative is rarely pointed out as they both cited popular characters James Bond and Superman as Marty Stews. She argued that male Mary Sues benefit the male audience's coming of age, what gets focused on in the culture as defined by boys and young men. Psychologically, there's a turning point in men's lives. There's a point where they need to break away from women in their youth, and then later they come back to women as grown men, but many men never make it, never quite come back to a world that includes women as human beings. The Star Trek, The Next Generation character Wesley Crusher, who was actually supposed to represent Star Trek fans in the series, was described, in hostile terms, as a Gary Sue by the feminist popular culture magazine Bitch. There is speculation amongst fans and academics, mainly pejorative, that Wesley was a self-insertion character for Gene Roddenberry, Roddenberry's middle name being Wesley. One possible reason cited for Wesley's poor overall reception was the writer's general lack, actual or perceived, of skill in writing about or for characters younger than 21 years of age, as actor Will Wheaton was at the time of his original casting in the role. Creator of the original phrase Paula Smith agreed with Cynthia Walker in a 2012 interview that are also Marty Stew characters, adding, in 2004, David Orr, in a review of online fan fiction websites fanfiction.net and Godawful Fanfiction for the New York Times Book Review, referred to Mary Sue as a ludicrously empowered author proxy. The Buffy the Vampire Slayer episode Superstar has been analyzed as being a deliberate satire of Mary Sue/Marty Stew type of stories. A popular subject of debate pertains to whether the Star Wars sequel trilogy features a Mary Sue and its protagonist, Rey. Screenwriter Max Lannis opined on Twitter in 2015 that the character fits this description, claiming that Rey is excessively gifted at a variety of skills. Conversely, Caroline Frank of Vox contended that Rey did not fit the Mary Sue profile, stating that any additional skills Rey has, mechanical work, hand-to-hand combat, climbing, etc., are explained when we first meet her. If she hadn't picked up those skills, she'd probably be dead. Other writers, such as Tasha Robinson of The Verge, have defended the idea of Rey being a Mary Sue, stating that for women who felt underrepresented through decades where most of the ladies on screen were victims, tokens, rewards, or shrews, it's natural to feel a sugar rush of fulfillment over strong characters like Katniss Everdeen and Imperator Furiosa, though these two characters are often not considered Mary Sue characters. Due to the villains occasionally overcoming or outsmarting them,